Hello and welcome to AXSChat. I'm delighted to finally welcome Zara Gemmell from HeX Productions. First met a few years ago in May, I believe, because you came to one of our GAD events, and we've been talking ever since. But before we tell people what we've been working on together, perhaps you could tell us a bit about yourself and HeX Productions and how you came to be interested in accessibility.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, come across Neil on many occasions lately, so that's really good fun. HeX, I'll give you a bit of background about HeX and where we started. So I joined HeX when it became a limited company in 2015. That's when That's when we founded a new business model, basically. We tested one of our local authority websites, and it was before the public sector legislation. So we used disabled user testers on one of the websites. It's something that has been done at this particular local authority before. I'd not seen it before, so going to see a user testing team down in Neath was a whole new experience for me. We came back from that after witnessing Alan Sleet, who's a disabled user tester. He's blind, and it just absolutely gobsmacked me watching somebody trying to navigate something that isn't accessible. It really hit my heart, and I couldn't come away and do nothing. So we went back to HeX. We changed our entire business model. We looked at all of the websites that we host and maintain, and we changed everything. We changed all of the code to bring it up to accessibility standards, and we did that for free for all of our clients. It was important to us because I couldn't not come away from that without having changed something. So from then on, it was kind of the way forward. We looked at organisations that were doing it. We looked to get involved where we could, and that's where we sprung upon Accessibility London. So we started going down to Accessibility London, met Alistair Duggan from the Government Digital Services. He invited us along to the Home Office roundtable events that were responsible for turning the EU law into the UK law for the public sector legislation. And that just spurred us on even more. You know, being involved with something from the beginning was really quite amazing. We continued with the Accessibility London events. We went to the Global Accessibility Awareness Day at Atos, and also the Barclays Tech Show Pro that year. Just to be in the environment of people that care, know, and want to do something about it was really quite amazing. Sadly, coming back into the industry after visiting these massive events was a bit of a shocker, because it just opened my eyes to how many people weren't doing anything. You know, there was no awareness. People didn't understand what accessibility was, let alone how to implement it. So it really dawned on me the amount of effort it was going to take to raise the awareness of what accessibility means.
Wow, so I didn't realise you'd actually gone back and retrofitted everything for free, which is fantastic. I think that's absolutely great. And yes, you know, I share your pain in terms of understanding. Yeah, we're out there, we're trying to boil the ocean with all of this stuff, because there's an awful lot of inaccessible stuff out there. There's an awful lot of people that don't even know to care, because actually I think, like you didn't know previously. It wasn't that you didn't care, you didn't know. I think there's a lot of the people just don't know. We don't teach it. It's not part of the education. And that's been one of my real passions, driving passions for myself and for Debra and for Antonio, has been to get that message out there so that people understand the need, and then find ways to actually start teaching people about it and spread the skills as well. So I know that you're, you know, you went to the meetups, but you now run one as well. So you run Accessibility Nottingham. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So on the back of Global Accessibility Awareness Day and coming down to Atos and realising that there's only one meetup in the entire UK, which is in London, it was nonsensical really to not try and reproduce that in the Midlands. There has since been a few more pop up, which are really, really good to see. But we piloted Accessibility Nottingham in 2018. We did 3 events before Christmas to see how we could attract the audience and see if we could get sponsorship, etc. Sadly, sponsorship seems to be a very hard thing to get hold of, especially on a subject that isn't really recognised, or wasn't at the time. You know, it's come a long way in a year. So we, next year we set it up again. We did a bit more research this time. We took on a couple of University of Nottingham interns for the summer. One was a philosophy student who had an interest in digital marketing, and the other one was a computer science student, and they both absolutely blew me away. They came on board, they did exactly what I needed. They went above and beyond. They learnt more than I imagined they'd be able to learn in such a small space of time. They produced a website for Accessibility Nottingham for me, with a bit of guidance on branding and that kind of thing. They marketed the whole event, so they put a whole Twitter campaign together. They put up all the assets for social media, and they absolutely blew it out of the park. And the interest that we got from the first meetup compared to the interest that we got the previous year was just phenomenal. I mean, we're not pulling hundreds of people, but it was just so nice to be able to have an impact in a small area at a small space of time. We want it to be we don't want it to be a tech event. We wanted it to be a community event. So the whole point was to mix and mingle disabled people, because I think there's a real sense of not knowing what to do with a disabled person, no matter what their disability. It's the kind of, well, I can't go and talk to that person. Well, why not? It's a human being. Just interact, talk. And towards the end, before the whole lockdown situation, we were having a nice little mix of people, and it was opening people's eyes and breaking down barriers, and that's all we want to do, really. It's not really about, it's about digital inclusion, but it's also about creating a community.
No, thank you.
Sorry. I love the point that you made, a couple of points that I wanted to talk about, a couple of points you made. So one of the points I love is that how this experience with another human being just touched you to your core, and it changed your life, it changed your purpose. Or maybe you found your purpose. I think that's one thing that a lot of us share in the accessibility and the inclusion industry. It's like we're just so passionate about it for so many different reasons. And it's lovely as it continues to be bigger and bigger and bigger reasons. Some of us joined it because they were a parent of a child with a disability. Some of us joined it because we had disabilities ourselves, or we were touched by it. But more and more we see people joining because they look at it and they're like, well, why would I not want to design things that included everyone? It just makes so much sense. So I loved that part of your story. I also thought it was interesting, and I applaud you for making all those changes for free. I applaud that, but at the same time, I hate that you have to do it for free like that. I have spent a lot of time, and we have on AXSChat, talking about how we're going to have to do a better job, certainly from now on, appreciating the work that people are doing for social good, things that really impact us in positive ways. And what we're learning through this COVID-19 virus is that people that maybe we didn't realize added as much value to society are on our front lines, adding the most value to society, and actually in some cases giving up their lives. So I'm hoping that humanity will not forget the lessons we're going to learn during these times, but it just feels like your story is so relevant to what we're walking right now in the world. So I knew I loved you the second you joined with that beautiful hair, but I just really, really applaud, all the work you are doing, because this is how you change the world. This is how you do it. So yeah. And y'all been, yeah. Well, and y'all been doing these meetups in person and virtually, is that right?
It's just been person at the moment.
Okay.
Obviously, we're going to have to switch to a virtual environment at the moment, but we're also taking away from the fact that I was speaking to Martin Sibley the other day. He's just launched Purple Goat Agency, and he said, well, you really should do it online as well as on a physical standpoint if you can in the future. And it's not really something that I considered doing. We have been videoing the meetups, but I'd not really thought about casting them. And I think he said you're going to reach a wider audience that way, and it just makes sense, doesn't it, really? But the whole point was to try and to make a community out of it as well, but the both will come hand in hand, I'm sure.
Yeah, Martin was on the program a few weeks ago, and we adore Martin. We just think his work is just amazing. And it just shows, once again, we're all so much stronger together doing this work. So it's and I think he makes such a good point, because sometimes, I don't know, all three of us, Antonio, Neil, and I, we were all over the world. We were like, we could never tell where's Antonio this week, before the COVID-19 virus. It's like, Neil's off, showing us his vacation photo. It was just very interesting. We were all over the place. But is that really what we're going to do with our society? Certainly we're not going to do it anytime soon. And so I think, Martin brings up a really good point. Not only, even when we get back to whatever we do in person, there's always people that for whatever reason can't join. Maybe because of disabilities or, cost, or they're too busy doing other things, but they still want to be engaged and get the data. I think that more and more we need to do this. And that, of course, all of those efforts continue to drive accessibility, inclusive design, because you don't want to do something that's not accessible to everybody. So applause for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the whole story as well for me started when I was young. I was introduced to a deaf mute man from my grandma, and we used to go bicycling together. And he communicated in his own way, and you learnt his patterns, and it worked. And I think if people just make a little bit more of an effort, then we can go a long way. It's frightening, yeah, I agree, and the world's frightening, but if you don't try, this brings me onto the BSL issue, try, you can pick up a few little signs that are going to help you just at least look like you care, just try a little bit harder.
So, you were mentioning that you decided to go back to what you have built to your customers and make it accessible. Can you tell us about how you're able to bring that knowledge up of your team in terms of accessibility? What have you done to make sure that you're able to achieve your goal and making your customer sites accessible?
Okay, so we've worked a lot on our internal processes to start with, but then obviously the user is the most important person. So I was looking out for partnerships and see where we could influence or be influenced by someone that was already doing a grand job of user research. We have found a user testing team that we have now partnered with, and it means that we can now provide an end-to-end process. So we can do design and wireframe reviews with real users. We can do development reviews, either internally or externally. And we can also offer an accreditation of a website. So the way we upskilled the team was just to bring them on the journey with us, and we try and do the same with any of our clients. We influence them from the beginning and try and get them on board with the process, instead of retrofitting everything and then coming with an end product that then needs to be made accessible. Well, no, flip it around. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start with an accessible model. Let's look at your designs. Can the wireframe be navigated correctly in the first place before you even layer it up with anything colourful and pretty? So we try and incorporate the whole process, and having the user testing team is just an amazing partnership. So the end process is when we've fixed all of the issues, either with a website that needed some attention or we've built it from scratch, we then go and user test it, and they get accredited, and there's then a subscription model that can follow so that we can keep up to date. It's something that we're doing with a lot of our local authority clients. So then we can just provide a monthly report, have a quick scan, quick technical review, quick manual review, and they can maintain their accessibility status at the end of the year. We provide another accreditation. And it's just a nice little model. It keeps everything tight and maintained, I suppose.
Is there anything that you can share with us in relation to those customers, before and after you've made their site accessible?
From a client perspective or the end user perspective?
No, from both.
Okay, so it's hard to get companies on board initially. You know, it normally takes one person. A lot of the time, like Debra touched upon earlier, it's usually someone that's either experienced a disability firsthand or has a family member that has. And I suppose that's a good place to start, but it's also, you know, the awareness raising piece around Accessibility Nottingham in bringing more than just disabled and relatives of disabled people together so that they can share their stories and it does get a wider coverage. So the buy-in from people initially usually starts with one individual, and it's not usually at higher levels either, sadly. The clients then, once we demonstrate, we demonstrate using assistive technology. So if someone approaches us and said, well, we need to make this accessible, how do we go about it? We try and reel them back a bit and try and explain why they're doing it first. So not just tick box, this is done, you know, off you go. It's the whole education process of, well, do you know what it needs to function to be accessible? Do you know how your navigation is going to work with a screen reader? Do you know that big scrolling banner at the top is just absolutely distracting people from your actual content? So we try and educate them on the fact that, you know, users can't use your site. You are excluding people from being able to use your services, being able to pay for things online. And then we try and demonstrate that with assistive technology as well, so that they get the first-hand experience. And that usually wins them over, you know, it usually makes them reconsider what they're doing and how they're promoting information. And hopefully at the end of that, you know, the customer comes out with a better outcome. When we speak to Alan, his what's the word? His example of a poor customer service or customer journey is the fact that if he wants to go and buy a pair of trousers online, if a product isn't described in the description very well, or you can't see it, because obviously he's blind, if he can't see the fabric, he doesn't know how it's going to feel, if he can't see the price, sometimes if it's not labeled correctly, you can't even see the price. And then there's a whole issue around the checkout system. So a lot of companies will show a little basket with how many items you've got in the basket, but if that's not read out to a screen reader, he doesn't know if it's added to the basket or not. He doesn't know what the value of in the basket. He can't, until he somehow, sometimes you can't even get to the checkout, but if you do get to the checkout, then you don't really know what you've purchased either. So he just wants to be able to buy a pair of trousers, get the best value, which also he won't be able to do unless everyone is allowing him to look at their website. So he's restricted with the products that he can buy just because the website isn't accessible.
And you know, we all need trousers.
We all need trousers.
As been discussed already on this call, but it's a very valid point, and I think that it's not just about, you know, the equity and the access. If you were to go into a physical store and an assistant said, "Oh well, I can't show you the trousers. I'm not going to tell you how much it's going to cost, and you know, maybe you'll get some, maybe you won't." That's rude. That's really bad customer service. And you know, what company really wants to be rude to their customers? What, you know, well, I mean, there's a few I've been in that actually make a business model of it, but they're few and far between. And it essentially, you know, being inaccessible, whether that be technically inaccessible because you don't work with assistive tech, or you know, cognitively inaccessible because you've designed stuff with dark patterns, or you are hiding things and making it really difficult for people, is equally rude. It's also, you know, it's damaging to their own business, because a business where you know, your front of house are rude to your customers isn't likely to be a business that's going to stick around for a long time. So I think that you know, people need to grasp that idea, and maybe, you know, we as a business, or sorry, as an industry, need to do better at, you know, drawing those metaphors out, rather than it being seen as, oh yeah, well that's just a nice to have kind of thing. So maybe we can do better on that. I know Debra's got a comment. Debra,
You know,
yeah.
looking for, I always am trying to look from the lens of a global lens. And then of course, at my beautiful little country here, in the United States. But I'm worried that during all these crises that we'll actually go backwards. And I know that there's a lot of confidence in the accessibility field here in the United States that everybody gets it now. And if you don't do it, we're going to keep suing you and all that. But it just feels like that isn't really the right way to keep moving this forward. And, you know, certainly from the States and from others. And I am curious, you know, really from all of you, you know, how do we really move forward? Because I remember during the financial crisis of 08 and 09, I went and I did a presentation for a government official in one of our states. And and I won't say which one or who the leader was, but at one point the leader said, boy, you must have a really, this must be a real uphill battle for you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you know, the normal people have been laid off, Deborah. So, and you're in here asking about people with disabilities. And I didn't reach across the table and slap the heck out of him, but I wanted to. But what I did do instead, was remind him that many people with disabilities work for him and in his state and in his communities. And just because you didn't see them and just because they weren't telling you they needed accommodations to be more productive, didn't mean that they weren't already in the workforce. So I reminded him this was not just about people entering the workforce. This is about us staying in the workforce, staying part of society. So I think it's going to take innovation, and I think it's really going to take, you know, we've got to look at what each other are doing and help. But I mean, what are y'all seeing? What would you recommend to the accessibility industry that watches us, that watches these shows? You know, how, you know, I think some of the stuff you're already doing definitely helps, but I'm also curious, Antonio and Neil, what your comments are. But let me give it to our gorgeous guests first. So.
Bless you.
It's Neil and Antonio, that's not you. Just kidding. Sorry, I'm kidding.
I only came in on the guest part, so we'll hand over. A similar story, really. We were working with or hoping to work with, it didn't come about, but a cinema theatre production stroke organisation. And we were talking about making their website accessible, first of all, the ticketing system, their booking system, that kind of thing. And then we moved on because they also have an education angle to their establishment. And we were talking about videos, and obviously captioning is a challenge to some, but also an easy option to others. And then I was talking about British Sign Language, and he was like, yeah, but it's really expensive to procure interpretation for all of the stuff that we produce. He said it'd be really handy though, and it'd be really nice to be able to offer that. And I said, have you ever actually considered employing a deaf person to do that with you? And the look of sheer elation on his face was, I'd never even thought of that. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked that he thought he'd just have to buy in that service, not thought about investing in a person to bring into the organisation. And it absolutely gobsmacked me. So I think in answer to that question is to employ a wider range of people, have the skills within the organisation, instead of thinking, well, we'll go out to a user group and they'll tell us what we need to know, and we'll do some disability research. And just hire people, hire a range of abilities, and you'll have everything that you need in-house. You won't have to pay out for extra resources to do extra research on users. Wow.
Excellent points. Neil?
It's a really good point. I do think that a lot of businesses are just in the mindset that you procure services.
Yeah.
And that's the way they go. So it's not even an ableist mindset. It's not even an unconscious bias necessarily. It's they've stopped thinking about hiring people a lot of the time for certain things, even though, you know, having an employee might be cheaper, because we've structured our economies here in the West, and particularly in the sort of Anglophone West, by outsourcing everything. And I think that one of the big disruptions we're going to see and are seeing right now with COVID-19 is the fact that actually that's not been great for our supply chains or our resilience or our ability to cope with anything, because just in time doesn't work when the world is shut down, and that your supplies are half a world away in a country you're busy insulting, or closer in the case of the UK, because we like to insult our close neighbours. You know? So getting a little political here, but essentially I think that we will have to look at new models. We will have to look at more community-driven models. Goodness knows what this, you know, massively deep recession that we're heading into will do to our economies. What it can't be is that it just goes to the rent take, all of the money goes to the rent taking classes. We can't go back to what was considered normal before, because we have an opportunity as a society to actually be more inclusive, to build back better, to do all of the things where actually you stimulate the economy by doing good stuff, rather than putting all of the capital back into the hands of very few. So I do think that we have an opportunity, but I also think that it is only an opportunity. It's not a dead cert. There is a real risk that the stimulus packages are all going to flow directly to share buybacks and to, you know, equity funds, and not, you know, flow down to the small businesses and the little companies that are doing great stuff, that or looking at ways of supporting individuals through universal basic income, which again I actually now think is perfectly viable. Because if we can spend billions and billions and billions on supporting everybody's wages through furlough schemes, we could equally afford to do this in the longer term and create a much more flexible and creative economy that can cope with all of the other stuff that's going to come, not just the diseases, not just the age-related disabilities, not just the fact that we're all going to have to care for those people, because it's not just about, you know, accessibility, but we've got this inverted pyramid right now. So we're going to have lots and lots of older people. We're not set up to care for them as a state. So it's going to be down to individuals. If the individuals can't do that because they've got to work all of the time, then we're going to be overburdening the state again. So we have to think about these things at a strategic level, at a sort of macroeconomic level. So I think there's a lot that could be really, really positive, but it's on us to hold the people to account. And what happens over the next few months is going to be really interesting. I've seen lots of people go, yeah, look, we've shown that we can, you know, work from home now, and yes, we disabled people, amongst whom I count myself, you know, can remote work, and you know, we've shown you that this stuff works and we can do it, and everything else. We need to be there and in that conversation and shaping those things over the next few months and years to come. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in the whole education process. I know you are too, so maybe that's the last topic we'll cover today, because I know I've rambled.
It was brilliant, I think.
But I do think that
I'm
we
going
need
to vote for you. Can you
No,
run,
I'm not
please?
standing for anything.
Please.
But the last thing that and the reason that Zara and I have been working together quite a lot is on apprenticeships. So young people building inclusive stuff. So so Zara, do you want to say a little bit about why you got involved in the apprenticeships?
Yeah, sure. Again, it's taking it back to basics. Put it into the education system. Make it an inclusive, accessible education system, not only for the people that need it physically and mentally, but to educate the ones that need the awareness, you know. And the whole that's kind of my next focus in life, is to make universities and colleges think about not only the students that they're taking, but also the people that they can educate and influence, you know. And I think, sadly, I think the world doesn't operate in a top-down approach, or a lot of organizations don't anyway. You know, the leadership should be coming from the top. But I think your student population is really where it's going to start to hit. And if we can influence them at a young age and show what can be possible in the world, then we've got a better chance of making this happen. Virtual learning environments, you know, they're not accessible. We've been working with a couple of universities on them, and it's just shocking that people can't even access information in the first place, let alone learn how to get along in the world and make it a better place. So
After all this time, it is shocking. It's shocking.
I was actually,
Aren't you an educator?
I was, I'm in a series of groups that are supposed to support teachers in online. The people who just decided to start using online solutions to support their students, and without any support from schools or education system. And I started to look at the communication for some of the vendors, and sometimes I was coming across this: reach out your IT person, reach out your, well, a school doesn't have an IT person, reach out an administrator. The school doesn't have an IT administrator. So some of the vendors, they are still, thinking in kind of they have modern tools, but they think in old IT. Okay, they're still there. They don't realize that they need to develop a solution in a way that the teacher can go set up something in a couple of minutes and is running, ready to go. And then they don't have to go back to that again, because they have kids to take care and they have personal lives. So I still see, especially in education that we're talking about, this mentality from vendors that is actually not matching the need and it could be something that they could take advantage, because teachers, they really want to use the tools, but I think they are still overcomplicating.
Yeah, and a lot of establishments are still, like you say, they're quite old-fashioned. I mean, a lot of public sector that we've come across, you know, they've still got internal servers, and we've had a whole issue with an inquiry recently where nobody can work from home accurately and correctly because the server is in a building and nobody can get correct access to it. It's like, come on, are we really still that far behind? So let alone the infrastructure, you know, that blows my brains out. But the education system is definitely also lagging behind. I've spent some time with, again, in a virtual learning environment. We were interviewing some faculty, and we were telling them, it was basically awareness raising piece around what accessibility means and how it should be implemented within a university environment. And a lot of the faculty were saying, well, why isn't this in our, you know, HR plan, and why isn't this a learning plan that we should all be doing within our, you know, your equalities and diversity and your health and safety and all that kind of thing? Why isn't that a standard document within their monthly or quarterly learning plan? If it starts there, then you've got half a chance of putting it into the education itself, but it's not even there. So yeah, to build my probably my dream would be to build firstly a VLE that is accessible, and then the services and the actual training resources within them to also be accessible, because again, a lot of them don't even know how to produce accessible documents. So a Word document to be accessible, please just everyone just learn how to make a Microsoft Word document accessible.
It's not hard.
So much. It will change so much.
It's not hard.
It's not hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, the accessibility, the apprenticeship was just like, wow, I need to get involved. I need to be there. I need to be on the top of this. I need to be underneath it. I need to be in the middle of it. I need to be part of what's going to be the future. And in my eyes, you know, I think we're doing an amazing thing. And I think it's quite funny because even, you know, the Institute has struggled with the concept, and that also makes me laugh. To deliver something is also challenging them to have to think about how they deliver the systems and the processes that we're working with currently, and I think that's also quite amusing.
It's amusing, but it's also quite, I suppose, gratifying that we're pushing through the fact that we're creating this standard with them. They're having to change their practices, and it's flowing through into the other apprenticeships. I know we need to close, and I need to thank our sponsors, Barclays Access, Microlink, and MyClearText, for keeping the show on the road, keeping the lights on, keeping us captioned and accessible. So, but I did want to say thank you for all of your contributions, and give a shout out also for the Institute of Coding, which is a consortium of universities, because there's a whole bunch of free courses available. As a result, the government is encouraging lots of free courses at the moment because people are at home. And the latest one is actually create accessible interfaces. So big woot woot, because we're actually getting some traction. So I think this is great. So thank you very much, Zara. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thanks, Deborah.
You were wonderful. Wonderful, Zara.
Hope to see you soon.